everyone. Welcome to the show. I'd like to welcome my good friend Yosef Wiener. We're here to discuss what I got wrong about the Educational Choice for Children Act. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me, Walter. Appreciate it.
So let's get into it. So the education bill works like this. Students, private individuals can donate the greater of $10,000 or 10% of their gross income to scholarship granting organizations. The scholarship granting organizations can then give scholarships to eligible students that can be used in private school funding, among other educational uses. The scholarship, the eligibility for students is 3 times the median income. So just to recap, that would be like, say, in Brooklyn, that would be the maximum a joint filing could be is around $280,000. So that's what the bill would do. It would provide scholarships to eligible students through the scholarship funding organizations. The reasons why I am not pro the bill are these. Firstly, it will create huge organizations that will gain enormous power and control over the schools. And even though it's true that I think anyone with a tax, any tax charity, a nonprofit charity can sign up. I think it will end up the communities will end up coalescing around big organizations which will gain enormous power. Because this donation is capped to a percentage of people's income, it will give wealthy individuals enormous control of those organizations. The fact is they'll be donating to their own organizations. This is not school choice. The promise of school choice is that individuals can make their own decisions, not through scholarships, but it's a nod to the fact that it's their money and they should be able to direct funding towards schools, or at least have a dollar for dollar reimbursement. From the fact that they are creating these organizations, it sounds to me like it's a Washington scheme. I don't see why they could, even if you want to have an eligibility, I still don't see why you couldn't have had it be a direct tax credit to the parents. And I think that is indicative of a Washington type scheme where you end up buying control. I think it is bad for the school system. Currently, the Guda and many Jewish organizations are suing New York State over unfair draconian measures they've tried to implement on our private schools. I think it would be very easy once for some bureaucrat in Washington in some subsequent Democrat progressive administration to say, well, this only funds schools and we define schools as X. And then you have all these schools already relying on this money, which will create a major problem for them. And I also think it won't actually lead to any relief for the parents. The only argument I see in favor of this is that there'll be more funding to the schools. And although that is not a small one, I see the risks that I've outlined above to be worse and greater. And I also think that in the end, it won't be much more funding, as people anyway donate to yeshivas. They donate gladly. And it will only be a percentage increase. And the opposite, people will feel like they've already donated through these organizations and might not want to donate more. But even if I'm wrong about that, and even if it will lead to more funding, I think the structure and the setup is negative for the school. And that is my position. And now I'd like to hear from Yosef Wiener.
Thank you, Walter. Appreciate the introduction. Your position, as articulated in your podcast a few weeks ago, was a little harsher than it was now. So you tempered it slightly already, even in advance of my joining, apparently. And before I get into it, I will first say, of course, you and I are good friends. So for those out there who don't know that, just putting that out there. So even if I do come out a little harsh, everyone should understand we are good friends. And the reason I agreed to join you on this podcast is you put out some strong words against this bill. And there are those in our community who are doing a lot of work and putting a lot of effort into trying to advance this bill because they think it'll help alleviate, to some degree at least, some of the stress on people within our community, and they're putting a lot of work into it. So I thought it's appropriate to join and explain why they are not wasting their time and they are doing good and to defend what they're doing. So that's why I agreed to join here. Of course, anything I'm saying, no one should assume it's to be taken too literally. It is not legal advice, of course. I did read the bill, but I read it quickly.
I don't think I've tempered my position. I don't want to give you that impression that I have.
Got it. No, I just mean the tone in how you presented it seemed a
Yeah, so
little
I just
light.
wanted to be more respectful because it's not because you came on, so I did tone it down, but all my previous adjectives remain true.
I greatly appreciate your toned down approach here. So let's jump into it just a little bit. First of all, there's an adage which I'm sure you're familiar with, but is super on point here, which is that the perfect is the enemy of the good. Now, if we come in and we say, well, we need tuition relief and we need school choice, and this is not that, which to a certain degree you're correct, it's not that. So you're certainly 1,000% correct that this is not the equivalent of full-fledged school choice in the sense of, I want to send my child to public school, I want to send my child to private school. I get dollars, I put it towards one or the other at my discretion, and it's all the same and everything is equal. This is a far cry from that, and I don't think anyone is actually claiming that this is the same as that. What is this? This is a bill that could provide a lot of relief in certain ways, short of being school choice, true school choice. And the truth of the matter is that this is the best that is realistic. And let me explain a little bit of why that's the case. Right now we don't have divided government. For many decades, we typically have divided government. We know that the Democratic Party is very anti-school choice. We know that the Republican Party, is fairly pro, and over the years has gotten more pro, and especially now we have a executive branch that is pro school choice. So we have an opportunity to do something at the federal level. In the past, it's been very tough. There's only been very little in terms of at the federal level being pushing for school choice. We have certain states that have school choice, Ohio and Florida to some degree, and a bunch of other ones, but not at the federal level. That's really not had much traction over the years. Now, for the first time, there's a chance to have some sort of school choice bill that will go forward because we have three branches of government, right? The House, the Senate, and the executive branch are all in the hands of Republicans that are, for the most part, more pro-school choice, unlike the Democrats that are avidly against it. Now, that being said, there's something called the filibuster, which means that in the Senate, a bill cannot advance unless you have 60 votes for most purposes. So most bills will not get past that filibuster if the entire Democratic caucus is against it. There's an exception to that filibuster rule, which is called reconciliation, which allows certain bills, including certain tax bills, to pass with only 50 votes. And that requires that any bill be paid for, meaning it has to be tax neutral, budget neutral. Now, that's a very short synopsis of a complicated topic. Why do I mention that? Because that is, I believe, I don't know for sure, but I believe that's why they think this might have legs, because they're trying to push this in through the tax bill. There's a large tax bill that Congress is negotiating over right now. It's probably going to be a few months, probably not till April, before it actually gets voted on, or more like May or June, actually. And the idea is that this might make its way into that bill. If it makes its way into that bill, then it will only need the 51 votes, the majority, and it might actually get passed without the opportunity for a filibuster. That being said, only certain types of bills can make their way in there with certain restrictions and, to the extent that they think it could happen. So the reason I say all this is because we have to be very mindful. There's a problem out there in our community and many communities throughout the country when it comes to school costs of private school tuition. And it's very easy to say, well, school choice means that I should be given a dollar that I can spend however I want. Very nice. That's great. But that's not reality. That's not the world we live in. If you live in certain states, maybe you can get it from a state level, but from a federal level, that's not happening. So this is an opportunity to maybe try to work within certain guidelines or certain restrictions that are necessary or necessary to comply with to get something to work. So that's just an introduction. I'll talk about some of the specifics, but my introduction is that we can't just throw out everything because it doesn't have what we need. We have to recognize there are certain restrictions that those are trying to make something happen are working within, and that's why this bill is fashioned a certain way to try to fit within the restrictions necessary. Go ahead.
Thank you for the introduction into that the constitutional process and how certain bills are passed. What you haven't addressed yet, and I'm sure you will, is that my assertion is that this bill will not provide relief to anyone.
Yeah, understood. So
and will create a federal bureaucracy that's worse than that brings a greater cost onto the community and to individuals than the money that would be gone for it.
So yeah,
I totally agree.
Yes. if that point is correct, then my introduction doesn't change anything. Because why push forward a bill, even if it's the only thing that you can get through, if it's not going to help anything? And the response to that is that you're completely wrong,
All right,
because
that's what I'd like to hear.
you have this concept in your mind, and unfortunately, maybe your attitude about government is that everything is tainted. I don't disagree with you that there's many problems with government, and government is not the solution to most problems, to most issues, and we should try to keep issues solved, outside the governmental process and to the extent possible within municipal governments and away from the large federal governments. I agree with all that, but you can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. You can't throw out everything. So,
Yeah, but
point being,
tell me how.
understood.
Tell me how Joe's student is going to benefit from this. The
Sure.
parents.
So,
You claim 1 second. The claim from the good. I just want to push back on something you said earlier, and then because I want you to address this point. You said that they don't claim this is school choice, but they claim this is better. That is false. The name of the bill is called the Educational Choice for Tuition. The claim that every single video being put out by Jewish organizations is we finally have a chance to have school choice in 50 states. This is their claim. So their claim is that this provides school choice. Now, if you're going to make an argument that it doesn't provide school choice, that it's already a shameful admission that the bill is not exactly what it says it does. So I would like to hear how it benefits specific children and not metaphors about bathwaters. So let's please take it away. I'd like to hear how I got it wrong on those points.
yes, sure. And I will mention that the bill is called the Educational Choice for Children Act. So it does mention about educational choice. And like you said, Aguda mentioned it's a national school choice proposal. That doesn't mean it's the same thing as full-fledged school choice, but it's a step in that direction. So let's talk about some of the details. Yeah, so there's the scholarship granting organizations. And your point is, well, that'll end up being one of these huge bureaucratic organizations that'll end up squandering away the money and not putting it where it's supposed to be and not going anywhere. But that's not what the bill says. First of all, it's very clear that it's intended to not have to have federalism issues, meaning states should not be involved. Okay, that's number one. Number two is a scholarship granting organization can be as little as any organization that will provide scholarships to at least 2 different schools. So let me use an example to illustrate the point. The neighborhood that you and I live in has about, I don't know, maybe 150, 170 families. And these families send their kids to a variety of schools, maybe 10 or 15, between boys and girls, 15 to 20 schools. And let's use some numbers that are realistic. So an average school charges maybe $10,000 in tuition per child, maybe somewhere between 8 and 13 or 8 and 15. So we'll say 10,000 as a round number. Mm-hmm. Let's say, there's a whole range of income levels among the community, starting from very little to hundreds of thousands of dollars, $500,000 at the very top. So how does this work? How this is going to work is that you have, let's say, a minority of the community, they're sending their kids to school. They can barely afford tuition because they make $50,000, $70,000, $80,000 at most. And, they can't afford the tuition. They have 5 kids on average, let's say. 5 kids, tuition's $10,000 a kid. That's $50,000. They're making not much more than that. So what are they paying in tuition? The tuition's $10,000. The school probably gives them a significant tuition reduction. They're paying $4,000, $5,000 per kid. Okay? The remainder, the school has to go and go and send fundraisers out, trying to somehow balance their budget. Now, so our community will create something called the Rabbi Langer Education Fund to be administered by Rabbi Langer. Or they'll create the Kahal Zichron Yaakov Education Fund, or any education fund that you want. All it says in the bill is that it has to give out funds to 2 organizations, 2 schools at a minimum, and the earmarked to students whose families earn less than a certain median income. And as you pointed out in your introduction, the median income is pretty high. It's close to $300,000. It's 3 times the median income of our locality. That's in the upper $200,000. So that can cover many families, of course. So let's say we have such a fund. The fund is administered by someone who's respected and trusted by the people in the community. Within our community, let's say we have 50 families that are making $10,000 each. Let's go back for a second. What's the maximum that a family can give towards this fund and get a credit? The maximum is the greater of $10,000 10 times the adjusted gross income of that person. So $10,000, most people are paying $10,000 in taxes. Now, again, this is a credit, which means it's a dollar for dollar credit. Every dollar you give to this organization, you pay $1 less in taxes, right? You end up paying $1 less in taxes. It's a credit. It reduces your taxes by that amount, which to me is an unbelievable idea, Walter, right? You're taking dollars that are going to go to the federal fisc to go paying for all sorts of other things out there and putting it towards your own community in this way, right? Shifting the same money. And now let me just go through my example and then I'll turn it back to you. In my example, you have, let's say you have 50 families that are paying $10,000 in taxes. So instead of paying $10,000 in taxes, they'll take a dollar for dollar credit and pay $10,000 towards the Rabbi Langer Education Fund, $500,000, right? 50 families times 10,000 each, $500,000. Then you have another, let's say 12 families that are making a lot of money. Their AGI is somewhere in the $300,000-$400,000 range, adjusted gross income. 10% of that can go towards this organization as a dollar for dollar credit. They don't lose a dollar net, meaning it's a dollar for dollar credit. They walk out with the same amount that they started. In other words, if they wouldn't have paid this to the organization, if they would have paid it to the federal government instead. So let's say those 12 families that have an AGI of about $400,000, they're going to give $40,000 towards this organization because that's 10% of $400,000. Still leaves a lot of money that they're giving to taxes, right? Again, if they have an AGI of $400,000, then they're giving a lot of money to taxes. They're paying maybe $80,000 of taxes or something like that. 50,000, maybe 50,000, 70,000. 40,000 of that will go to this Rabbi Langer Education Fund. The rest will go to the regular tax bill. That 12 families times $40,000 gets you to $500,000. I just ran some basic numbers just to illustrate the point. The 500 that I started with, and these 500 adds up to $1 million. We have $1 million now sitting in the Rabbi Langer Education Fund, right? It doesn't need to be any bigger. And by the way, you mentioned these huge bureaucratic organizations. If you don't want it to go to a huge bureaucratic organization, you open your own. All it needs to do is give to 2 people, and you could qualify for this dollar for dollar credit with 2 people in 2 different schools, to be clear. So we have the Rabbi Langer Education Fund that has $1 million to allocate. $1 million. That's a tremendous amount of money. And turn over to you. I still want to talk about the output of where it goes. But so far we talked about the input into the organization. Go ahead.
The input is nothing without the output. But I have a problem with the way you are. I have a couple of flaws in your argument right away. So like this. Your assertion is, well, I claim that the organizations will become these monstrous bureaucratic systems, and your claim is that's not at all important because you only need to be a qualifying organization, like you correctly stated. You only need to have 2 schools, and you only need to support 2 schools, and give tuition to at least two people. So you should be good to go. I would like to pose this question to that assertion. Let's say I want to create a hypothetical Hatzalah type organization. I want to create an ambulance service that would train people and respond to calls, and I want to do this for community. I don't want to be under Hatzalah. I find like their practices to be whatever, I don't like it, so I want to do my own organization. Immediately, I would have all the leaders of the community coming down on my head and saying, this is a waste of resources, this is a waste of time, this is in fact dangerous, it doesn't make sense to have 2 organizations to do the same thing. Everybody should coalesce around one organization. And this is not hypothetical. This is a story I've been watching in Lakewood. So what will happen is, if this bill passes, is that sure, in theory, each person, each school, each yeshiva, each shul can technically have their own organization. Practically, what I believe is that we'll all coalesce around one, and then those organizations, 1 or 2, the Hasidim will have their own one. And then what ended up happening is not only will these organizations become huge, monstrous organizations, but they will exercise an enormous amount of power. And also, like you said, somebody that is earning a lot more can donate more. So what you're doing is you are giving enormous amount of power to those to set policy. So what you and you also haven't addressed the fact that at the end of the day, the Treasury will consider this money to be coming from the government, and they can we saw that bureaucrats can fit entire ocean liners through tiny holes in the text. They'll define a school to be whatever they want to be a school. That is my fear, and I think well founded. And any one of these parents that you're describing that would supposedly benefit would benefit from the same bill if it just said you can take your tuition bill straight out of your taxes, dollar for dollar, up to $10,000, or up to or 10%, up to 10% of your income. I think all the parents that you're about to name would benefit from this, would benefit from in that way. It would be a much more dignified way of benefiting. And there's no reason why that couldn't pass, why that wouldn't be able to pass a reconciliation bill, or a budget bill. So I still don't hear the benefits of the scholarship organizations. I only hear the drawbacks, but please, you can either address what I said, or you can move on to who would benefit.
Yes, good point. A couple points on that. One is, of course, advocates for tuition relief would prefer a direct payment to the school, which a parent can make and reduce their own tuition. Of course, every single one of those 40 organizations that signed onto this bill would, of course, prefer that. That's obvious.
Yeah,
the reason they're doing it this way is because they feel it has more of a chance to pass. Why? What exactly is the point of why that one versus this? I don't know. I have some thoughts, but I'm not going to speculate. That
is key to this debate. Because my assertion is that it's a Washington scheme and it's by design. So if you believe that there's something non-innocuous,
okay, so you have the attitude that everything that touches government in any way, it must be nefarious. But this was advocated for by private organizations that are trying to provide tuition relief, and they went to government and are trying to push this through. The reason they did not just give a dollar for dollar credit for the parent themselves that, to reduce their tuition is because that would not work. That would not pass. They couldn't get that to work. The reason is because of this. I don't know exactly. I have some thoughts about that. But I think let's move on to the other points you made. You also said that these organizations are going to get very large. I don't agree, because I think that I have the power to determine what I do with my money. Of course, at Sala, something like that is where there's an organization, one per community. It's a communal organization, right? Meaning it's a communal need it's a need that can only be satisfied by a communal organization. You can't have private organizations filling that need. It can only be communal. But when it comes to this, it's just a function of the law. The law says you can have an organization as small as you want it to be, as long as it satisfies that requirement, that it gives out money to two students from two different schools, right? So anyone on my block, you live on, someone lives on Eastbourne Road, the 20 people on that road that want to do this can make their own organization and administer it and follow the guidelines and get the credit. That's all it needs to be. It doesn't need to be one of these huge organizations that is one for the whole community. And I agree that would not be optimal. So that's in response to that point. And in response to your final point about the school being defined, I agree with you that I don't like the fact that government has the ability to find how these things work optimal. We're dealing with a situation where we're trying to dig out of a hole we're already in. To some degree, the government has some say over how it's going to play out. I mean, your other scenario where I would directly give money to my kids' schools and get out of taxes, reduce my taxes that way, would also give the government some say over how you define a school. So however you dig ourselves out of this hole, of our tuition hole, it allows some room for the government to have some say. Although in this bill, they clearly made an attempt to try to limit the government's ability to define a school. They gave very clear definitions, and they said the states have no say in it, and it is what it is. So I agree. There's some potential for government, assertion of authority over that, but I think we're dealing with the best we can do. Go ahead.
Okay, so I wanted to let you move on. I just want to respond to one thing you said. I agree that you're right that if the tax code, even if it would be a direct a tax receipt, obviously they're still defining what the receipt is. That just is in a very different situation, because there the ball is in your court, in the sense that your claim is to the IRS. I don't have to give you this money, and then they would have to say back what you actually do, which is a harder thing for them to do, as opposed to scholarship organizations, which the Treasury will claim is funded by them, even though technically it's being funded by the donors, but they will claim it's being funded by the Treasury. So that is an area where they will go after this. And I don't think it's like just a hypothetical. I think the teachers' unions will do everything they can to go after this, because this is the enemy of the greatest grift this country has gone. Anyway, please get them. We don't want to belabor those points too much. Please get
Yes.
into
Okay.
how
And
the
by the
average
way, talking
student will
about the
benefit.
teachers union, by the way, the teachers union has already come out against this bill. The NEA, National Education Association, has already put out a statement blasting this education bill, which to me is an indication that it's a very good bill, because if the teachers unions are coming out against it, it means it's probably good for us.
Yeah, I mean, that would be, you would definitely get an agreement from me that anything the teachers union is against, I would be reflexively for. Yeah, that's
Okay, there you go.
yeah.
So I could show you the National Education Association, the main teachers union, has blasted this bill, and they're pulling full stop to try to fight it. So
Yeah,
let's talk.
anything that takes away from their grift is bad. It's bad for them. But again,
Yeah.
okay,
So let's
sure.
talk about how this plays out. So we have $1 million within our little community here, 150 families, that can be used to support those who can't afford their tuition. Now, people are complaining, oh, well, the schools will just raise the tuition. Well, maybe they will raise it a little bit, but that doesn't matter to me. Meaning, I still believe we get the tremendous benefit from it. So let's say you have a family where, let's say in a community like ours, you have, I don't know, 40 families, 50 families that can't pay full tuition, 70 families, half the families that can't pay full tuition, because full tuition is very difficult to pay, with the Orthodox Jewish lifestyle, and just to make all the necessary payments for necessities that we need to live with. So, let's say tuition's $10,000. Let's say you have a family of $50,000. Let's say they're paying $6,000 per kid, right? So this is $1 million to go around. You put $1 million between 50 families. That means $20,000 to each family. They each have 4 kids. That's $5,000 per child. Now,
No, there's a cap. There is a cap on the what they receive. It's
allocation.
dependent on their income.
Right. They have to be. You mean which families can be recipients of these scholarships?
Yeah, but also, even if you can be a recipient, there's still a cap on the recipient on how much they receive. You can't just take all the money.
The math I just laid out was $5,000 per child. Does that exceed the cap? I don't remember. I don't believe it does.
Okay, so you have $5,000 per child.
You have $1 million. You divvy up $1 million between 50 families. That gives you $20,000 per family. If you have five children in that family, well, let's say 4 children for that matter. Keep it simpler. 4 children. The $20,000 divided by 4 children is $5,000 per child, right? $5,000 per child. Let's say we're dealing with children who their tuition was $10,000. Their parents were paying $4,000 or $5,000. That'll get you basically most of the way towards full tuition. Now,
but the parents will receive no relief.
Well, so either the parents will receive no relief, some relief, or all relief. I don't know exactly how it will play out, but in any of those 3 scenarios, it will be a huge boon for our community.
1 second. You can't just say, no, 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. I asserted that they will receive no relief because you said they were probably only paying $5,000 to begin with, and then if they're getting supplemented another $5,000 into the tuition, it would just come straight back into the school. So the parents will receive no relief. That's my assertion. Do you say that is incorrect?
I think it'll count towards their tuition. The school might raise tuitions to
not raise tuition. If a parent was paying $5,000 per kid because that's all they could afford, and the tuition scholarship gives another $5,000, so the parent will receive no relief. Even if your assertion is that the school will benefit, but the parent themselves will receive no relief. Am I making a mistake, or are you making a mistake?
I think the parents will have
How?
relief because the parents
How?
The parents were paying $5,000, and the organization paid another $5,000. 5 plus 5 is 10. That covers their tuition.
Yeah, but the parent with only the parent did not have any more money.
Yeah, you're right.
The
parent is paying the same amount of tuition the next year that they were paying the prior year, but now they're paying their full tuition, or their full tuition.
Their full tuition is paid for. So so you're saying it's a net positive for the school, but you agree that the parent receives no relief. Is that your
scenario? The parent is receiving no relief. Let's say you had a parent that was paying $7,000 or $8,000. Let's say a parent was making, again, the amount of income that a family can make to be eligible is up to what is like $280. That covers probably 2/3 of our community, right?
Your cutoff is pretty close to the 300 mark. In many cases, it's if you're unlucky enough to live in Las Vegas, you can only make up to $250,000 a year. So I'm not sure that it's covering. I don't believe that it's covering 2/3. Let's say half the Jews are eligible. many of those people that are eligible are already in education who get major breaks in the first place. So I'm still trying
Yeah,
to find the person you
this is a whole
believe will get.
topic. This is a whole topic for itself. But based on my experience and my personal experience, I think the average family within our community, maybe they're making 150 to 200, maybe 150 between the dual income household, and they're getting a scholarship, right? Maybe tuition is 11,000, or maybe they're paying 7 or 8,000. Okay, so they're getting a $3,000 tuition, $4,000 tuition scholarship per child, and then this would certainly provide them some relief, right? If you're paying 3,000 and you get 5,000, it gives you 2,000 of relief. Number one. Number two, it's a net positive for the school. And you're right, it could shake out different ways. It could shake out relief for the parents. It could shake out that the schools will end up increasing tuition because they are able to, and it'll be a net positive for the school. But the ultimate point, let me just bring out the point. The ultimate point is that this will be more money within the community, which is where it should be, because it's going towards the school, which to counterbalance the fact that our tuition dollars go towards public schools. And that's a tremendous asset or growth forward within our community's ability to handle its needs. $1 million, think of that, $1 million within a small community like this, that will, instead of going to fix some bridge in Afghanistan, right? That's a whole different topic for itself. But we'll go to our own community, whether it lowers the tuition relief of a specific parent, or it enables a school to handle what it needs to handle, be able to have another teacher when it has 30 kids in a class, or to be able to have an English program where the kids are actually educated, or to be able to deal with, psychological, mental health issues with students. An extra $1 million, whether it comes because certain parents, their tuition bill is reduced, or it's not, and the school as a whole just has more money, no matter how it shakes out, it's a tremendous boon for the community. Go ahead.
So your claim is also that the school wouldn't raise tuition. So I remember a few years ago when my kids started going to school, there was a big push for something called UPK, and the UPK meant universal pre-K, and it was free. The government was going to pay for it. And my wife and I were like, great, now it's going to be free. And then we get a letter from the school saying, well, you still have to pay exactly the same tuition. UPK just allows us to do X, Y, and Z. So I'm not confident that the schools won't just raise tuition, because not only would I assume they might do that anyway, but there's actual evidence that that's exactly what would happen, because that's what they did. Because actually,
right, so Walter, let me respond.
The schools do not have enough money, regardless of this bill, and they will always be coming after our money. And they do great things, the schools, and I don't have a problem with that. But I think that for a bill to be billed as a tuition education choice bill, and then it provides almost no relief for parents, it provides more money directly to schools, which could be covered, which I think comes through, which will only be a slight increase because of the donations. And then, like I said, you're giving all this control to organizations. So I see the benefit, which is a slight increase to the school funding. I think the problems heavily outweigh the benefit. But I'll let you
let me respond to that point. I want to say something about the schools. Some people view the schools within our communities as the enemy. I'm not saying you do, but some people do.
I 100% don't. I just want to get that out there.
I'm glad to hear that, because people do not understand that the schools and the people are made up of people, right? We don't have like some big conglomerate out there that or some puppeteer holding some strings and making themselves wealthy behind the scenes. There's no one who's becoming wealthy from running a school. It's just not the fact on the ground. Okay. And I know plenty of people who are involved in running schools and managing schools, and it's a massive struggle day in and day out to keep a school going. Tremendous struggle. No one's making it rich. And if a school, and when a school, when they have a tuition amount per kid, they don't cover all the costs through tuition. Everyone knows that. They cover half, 2/3 if you're lucky, and then they have to go around scrounging for money. So if a school has a child who owes tuition of $40,000 for 4 kids, and they're paying next to nothing, but they could afford to pay $10,000 for for the 4. And then an organization will come and say, we'll cover the $10,000. The school might say, okay, but we might need to raise tuition to cover the shortfall that we still have, because these schools have tremendous shortfalls. So the insinuation of this claim is that, well, we're not really helping anything because the schools will just raise tuition and we're in a net zero. And the answer is we're not in a net zero. As a community, we're in a net positive. Of course, the hope is that they wouldn't raise tuition and that the parents themselves would be the ones with the full brunt of the benefit of this bill. My guess is that if this thing does pass, the chances are it's a mixed bag. Some schools will raise a little bit, some schools will raise a lot, some schools will raise very little. And in which case, it'll probably have a partial tuition reduction effect for those parents, and partially it'll be cover the shortfall that the school had beyond tuition. In either case, it's a tremendous boon to the community. So I don't hear this argument at all. But anyways, I think we've covered most of the issues here. And I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yes. And let me just respond to the one thing before we close up. I really want to thank you for coming. I just want to say to respond that I agree that the schools do amazing work. And my argument is that this does not get them the funding in the right way. I hope they do get funded. I would not begrudge them anything to raising tuition. The public schools are funded $40,000 per kid. This doesn't come anywhere close to that. With the amount of strain that our schools are under, what they're able to do is something phenomenal. The other point I just wanted to finally make is that I believe that having these scholarship organizations will be a hindrance to eventually having real school choice, because these entrenched organizations will then be actually a roadblock to that.
Right. So anyway, on that point, and I just want to close out with this, on that point, there's a cost-benefit analysis, of course. Yes, in a perfect world, you'd have things set up a certain way. Now, you're suggesting that by creating this, it'll remove any initiative towards creating that perfect system. Well, that's only an argument if you believe that perfect system really has any legs to it and there's any possibility of it taking place. I don't know that you are able to make that assessment, because I don't know that you have the political knowledge of the landscape out there. One second. And so when an organization like the Aguda, or people who do have their feet down in Washington, they've been around the block for many decades and they know what is possible and what is not. And they come out and they say, we think that this is good. And you say, well, this is going to make it more difficult. It'll hinder the ability for us to push for a proper school choice bill, a full-fledged school choice bill. Even if you're right that that's true, that assumes that you can actually expect to have a full school choice bill at some point in the future. And I don't know that you're qualified to make that cost-benefit analysis, and I know that they are. So that's my
COVID-19, where there's been major pushes in the country for school choice. There was almost 0 states that had any sort of school choice before. Now, a good percentage of the red states do in this country. So it's easy to assume that there could be some real movement in that regard. That's how I just respond to that. Anyway, I think we've made the points clear. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll leave a poll on this episode for what people thought.
Thank you so much, Walter. Have a great night.
All right, everyone. That was the debate. Yosef wanted to go with no cameras that debate, so that's what we did. After the show, he messaged that he wanted to drop some points, so I agreed to play them. So here we go. I did speed up the audio just for expediency. You can slow it down on your device if it's too fast.
Walter, thank you for giving the opportunity to make some follow-up points with regard to our very insightful discussion. First, I want to make 3 points. First, with regard to the point you raised about how if these tuition assistance grants will be given to schools for specific families, the schools might just then go and raise the tuition for those families. I did respond to that, but I think a very simple approach to alleviate that concern would be that the fund, in my example, the Rabbi Langer Education Fund, would say to the school, we're giving it to you specifically with regard to these students, and you may not increase their tuition. And if you go and do increase their tuition, we will not be giving you scholarship funds in future years. So it gives these organizations, which are basically the arm of those who are the donors, easy ability to control where it goes to and the terms under which it's given, which could be used to prevent the schools from raising tuition for the children after the donation is given. I still think the other points I made are true as well. Even if this doesn't work, it still is a boon for the community. But I do think that this is an approach to be able to prevent that concern from taking place. Now, I also wanted to mention a different thing. You asked, well, why don't we just get regular vouchers? Why are they doing this? So I'll tell you a few reasons that are possible reasons why this is the path that was chosen. One is regular vouchers have a long history of opposition, political opposition, and it could be that they felt that they just couldn't get past that. And on top of that, Number one is that public funding for education typically is borne by the state, and public schools are paid for by the state. So here you have a federal government paying, effectively offsetting some tuition costs. And it stands to reason people say, well, why is the federal government paying for this? This should not be a federal government outlay. And therefore, if it would be a direct voucher that a parent will get to pay for their own child's tuition, there could be backlash and say, well, why is the federal government paying for that? That might be another reason why this is structured differently than a regular voucher type situation. Instead, it's a tax credit. Another reason might be that it makes it easier to get into a tax bill because it's more similar to a deduction, like a charitable deduction, than it is to an education funding bill, which really should not be in a tax bill. Another reason might be that that there's those who have constitutional oppositions to funding school choice, and by doing it this roundabout way, you kind of alleviate some of that concern. Not only that, actually, I did take a look and I discovered that one of the Democratic members of the House Ways and Means Committee stood up to oppose this bill, and he actually said that, I'll read to you his language, finally, part of the disguise is the way this particular bill seeks to circumvent the First Amendment requirement of separation of church and state because it does not provide direct vouchers, because that would clearly be unconstitutional. So this congressman, Lloyd Doggett of Texas, basically saying, I'm going to oppose this because to me it's an end run around what I think would be unconstitutional. A direct voucher would be clearly unconstitutional according to him, and therefore this is just a way of getting around that. So his point is that I realize what you guys are doing. You guys are worried that if you provide for a direct credit by a parent for their own child, that's clearly unconstitutional, so you're trying to do this in a way which is not as clearly unconstitutional. Now, the counter-argument is that neither of them are unconstitutional, but the point is that politically, there's a better chance of this getting across the finish line than a direct credit. So those are all reasons, possible reasons, why this approach was taken and not a direct credit by a parent. And a fourth or fifth reason might be that this actually provides a lot more opportunity, because if it's limited to the parents themselves, they themselves, often are not paying that much taxes, so their credit is limited, whereas since it's actually limited to the greater 10,000 or 10% of AGI for wealthy taxpayers whose 10% of AGI is much greater than those of who need tuition, it can allow a lot more tax dollars to be put towards this program. That's point number two. The last thing I just want to say is that I want to be clear that I'm not a full-fledged fan of this program. I do think there are some significant concerns, not the concerns that you have raised, though. The concerns I have is that I don't like the idea of government involvement in our education at all, because it enables the government to say how things go. Whenever you take money from someone, then you're effectively open the door for them to say that they want the program to be run a certain way. That's just a function of reality. And that would be even more an issue if you had direct vouchers. So just putting that out there. This actually is a reason to oppose direct vouchers. But even in this indirect way, it gives them latitude, maybe in the future, to try to insert themselves into education. And we know that for hundreds of years, the Jewish people tried to fight against that, especially under the Russian czars, where they tried to dictate what our educational system should look like, and we tried to do everything we can to get out of that. So for us to go back potentially into that type of scheme is not, has its risks. So that's a significant reason to be a little bit weary of anything. But yet, it seems like the whole Jewish community is clamoring for vouchers. So, for time for vouchers, this is no worse than anything better. And the last point is that another reason to consider not jumping into this is because if this can be passed through reconciliation, which means all you need is 50 votes, it can also be removed with 50 votes. So all you need is a future administration, perhaps even 4 years down the road, with a Congress that looks the other way about these things, and they can end it. And once the Jewish community becomes reliant on this, it can be much, much harder for us to handle a situation where something that we were given is pulled away from us. So these are all considerations that are serious considerations. I'm sure that the people who are advocating for it have thought about these considerations. My point is, this is not a black and white situation at all. But I still stand by what I said, that your concerns that you raised, I disagree with. Anyways, thank you so much for letting me speak my piece. Thanks so much. Bye.
I just wanted to point out, just as in the debate we had, I don't believe this Rabbi Langer fund will exist. I think it will be a huge bureaucratic organization, but that's up to the listeners to decide. It is certainly a fear that they could pull it back. I don't agree that it's a problem with direct vouchers. Again, when I say direct vouchers, I'd be very happy with just a tax write-off. The reason why that would not be the same is because when you create a program where you're giving money directly to the people, either in the form of a tax write-off or in the forms of vouchers, it becomes very difficult politically to pull that back, as opposed to something that's coming through a fund or something that's coming through like this big program. I think one of the main arguments is that it's better to have a federal bill than by the states, and I don't accept that argument at all. Firstly, because there have been many states that have instituted some sort of school choice, which is much better than the one put in front of us. And I think once you have the results of those states coming through, then it will promote other states to look into this very seriously, and they'll be pushed by their voters as they see that education in other states is way better. And as we saw during COVID, parents do care. I also think in this time specifically, where school choice has gained so much prominence, we really don't have to settle. Especially since this is what's coming out of the White House.
And on the education department, why nominate Linda McMahon to be the education department secretary if you're going to get rid of the education department?
Because I told Linda, I hope you do a great job and put yourself out of a job. I want her to put herself out of a job. Education department. So we're ranked number 40 out of 40 schools, right? We're ranked number 1 in cost per pupil. So we spend more per pupil than any other country in the world, and we're ranked at the bottom of the list. We're ranked very badly. And what I want to do is let the states run schools. I believe strongly in school choice, but in addition to that, I want the states to run schools, and I want Linda to put herself out of a job.
All right. So in the time when the president is talking about school choice, and we have supporters of it all across the country, I don't think this is the time to settle. All right, that'll do it for today, guys. Please send us your thoughts and messages, and we look forward to hearing from you and playing them on the show.